You know what I love about Volkswagen? They still have real names. You know, Taos, Tiguan, ID Buzz. Well, it kind of falls apart there. But for the most part, they still use real names instead of numeric letter combinations that I think most people find confusing. And this is the brand new Volkswagen Tiguan. And I'm here with the Rocky Mountain Automotive Press doing a fast review. So I have the car for about a half an hour. So I'm gonna give you my impressions. We'll go under the hood, we'll talk about styling, we'll take it for a ride. And then at the end, I'll give you my final take on the new Tiguan. But let's start with Tiguan. And for those of you who don't know, Tiguan is a conjoining of the word tiger and iguana. Yep, there was a magazine article in Germany and they had a contest what to name it, and somebody came up with half tiger, half iguana. That's how you got Tiguan, which I think is actually pretty cool. And speaking of pretty cool, I think that the look of this new car is pretty cool, as is the way now. It is much more square bodied, much more horizontal, much more vertical, less roly-poly, and that is a very good thing. And let's face it, the Tiguan has always been kind of down the middle in the full size or mid-size, I should say, SUV segment. It's one of Volkswagen's best-selling cars, so this is an important car for them. And the question I'm wondering as I'm doing this review is, has Volkswagen got its mojo back? And I think we can answer that with maybe this car, because following up on the ID Buzz, which has a lot of mojo, can this car bring more people into the Volkswagen showroom as opposed to just having a car that gets discounted and is built in Germany, which it might be, don't know. I think it is built in Germany. The Atlas is built here, but not designed for Americans. So, how does this work in America? Under the hood is the similar engine that was in the previous generation. It's a 2-liter, 4-cylinder turbo, produces 201 horsepower. So it's not a tremendous amount of power. There is an R-Line coming, I believe in 2026, which will boost the horsepower up to 270-ish. So if you want more power, wait a year. But 201 horsepower out of a little, 2-liter turbo isn't bad. Of course, it's got an automatic transmission, and you can have it in front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. The base car with the 2-wheel drive starts in the low 30s, and it goes up from there. So let's see how much room is in the back. Now, like I said, the Tiguan is one of Volkswagen's most popular cars here, so they can't mess this up. And usually when that's the case, the changes tend to be more evolutionary than revolutionary, and this is certainly the case. What I like about the Volkswagen in general is it's got kind of got that German engineering honesty to it, and you feel that immediately when you look in the interior. There's not a lot of fancy features. Everything is kind of straightforward. It's usually very driver-centric, which what I mean by that is that it's basically built around the driver, which is great, because when you're going down the Autobahn, you want a car that is built around you, and that's why German cars are so popular. This, of course, is the all-wheel drive. In Volkswagen terms, that is 4Motion. And let's see how much room is in the back seat. A little bit of fanciness here, a little bit of color to take away from the drabness. It smells like a Volkswagen, which is a good thing. You've got 2 little pockets here. You've got USB-C ports. You've got climate vents for the back seat, which is also a thoughtful feature. What you don't have necessarily is a lot of lack of room. I mean, look at the headroom. I'm sitting behind myself. Look at the legroom and the headroom. Volkswagen, in all of their cars, usually is best in class in terms of second row seat room, and this is no exception. So if you are going to cross-country this, you're not going to be sitting in a penalty box if you're in the back seat. Let's look at the front. Now, Volkswagen has done some pretty questionable things recently, and hopefully this new Tiguan addresses those issues. And I'm already seeing a huge improvement. Like in the ID Buzz over here, you would not have 4 window switches. You would only have 2, and then you'd have a button that lets you toggle between the front and the rear. Really bad idea, very confusing. And then also in the infotainment, oh, they moved the stop start right there. They did away with the volume knob, but now they've brought it back in kind of a thoughtful way. So this is a multi-function switch. You got your volume. You can also change it to your different drive modes, and we have comfort, custom, off-road, and snow. Not sure if there's a lot of ground clearance for off-road, but there is a mode for it. And then you can do snow, and it's kind of cool how that mirrors that. So it's an elegant touch that probably doesn't add a lot of expense, and yet makes for something that is, kind of fun and interesting and different. I'm going to put it in sport mode because we're not going to go off-road, so I want to see how it drives. The thing I don't like, and they haven't quite done away with this, is the volume knob there, the stupid slider. At least you have another way of controlling the volume. And of course, I'm not a big fan of these haptic controls right there. I believe in the first iteration of this, when they first did it, like in the Golf and the GTI and the Golf R, these were actually not lit up at night, if I remember right, which was not grand. You have kind of a evolution of the shift lever, so forward for forward, back for reverse, and then we are in sport mode, and then you have traditional buttons on the steering wheel, and you have a very gentleman steering wheel, which I love, leather wrapped, stitched, all the good things, and then a multi-control stock over here, which lets you do things like control your windshield wipers, also very good. And do I have electric seat controls? I do, and I even have lumbar support. Oh, what luxury for somebody with a bad back. Love it. And then over here you've got, of course, a traditional screen that lets you probably see things like your speed, your RPM, how many miles you have until empty, what gear you're in, which is also very nice. And then, of course, a whole bunch of traditional functionality right there. So let's take it for a ride and let's see if it drives well. Because, look, the reason I would get a Tiguan over like a RAV4 or a CHR, which are the two best-selling cars in the segment. I mean, gosh, between those two, I want to say the RAV sells 460,000 units if you're in the biz a year. Not much less for the CRV. That may be, and I'm not too far off, that may be as many cars as Volkswagen sells in its entirety in America. So I hope that puts it into a little bit of perspective, just how popular this segment is and just how popular the RAV4 and the CHR, the Honda, are in this category. All right, so let's floor it. A little bit of, got that kind of traditional throttle tip in where it gives you a lot of power and then it kind of goes off, but the turbocharged engine up here at altitude is really free revving, and loves to be driven. And immediately I want to drive this fast. That is a good sign. There must be some GTI/Golf R DNA in this thing because it's very tossable and very fun to drive. And I think that's what distinguishes the Tiguan from all of the other competitors. And that is that this thing is definitely Autobahn bred and has that traditional German suspension engineering, steering feel. See how the brakes are a little mushy. So, okay, everything but the brakes. This thing likes to be driven quick. And for a mid-sized crossover, it's actually fun to drive it quick, which I would not say is the case for many of the other cars in this segment. The other thing that's happening in the segment, and Tommy and I were just in Plano, another Volkswagen, we were just in Plano looking at this, the new RAV4 GR Sport, not GR Sport, like the R line in the Volkswagen, is a thing now. And I think that for a long time, manufacturers had decided that we wanted off-roady cars, which we still do, because they're still very popular, especially off-roady crossovers that don't have a low range, to kind of express our active lifestyle. But now there's a trend to do more sporty vehicles. So taking kind of like I said, the DNA of the Golf R and the GTI and infusing it into these more, shall we say, family hauling, job going crossovers. So I don't feel like I need more horsepower, but then again, I never feel like having more horsepower is a bad thing. But this does seem to have a good bit of balance, and I could see this being a very fun car to own when the road gets twisty like this, which I wouldn't say about the competitors in this class. I mean, there's no understeer. The steering actually is communicative. In other words, I can kind of feel what the front tires are doing, and I'm having fun. You know what else I need to have fun, Volkswagen? I don't need these cup holders. Why don't you move them back here and give me a stick shift? I think that would really, be the piece de resistance that would separate this vehicle from the herd. Do most people who buy these know how to drive a stick shift? Yeah. I mean, for enthusiasts, stick shifts are coming back. So let me park this car and let me give you my final thoughts on this Tiguan and what I would love to see. And call me crazy, because this is a crazy idea. So for a long time, if you're a car enthusiast or an automotive journalist, you know that we always love station wagons, we love manuals, and sometimes the manufacturers just think to themselves, these are just a very small percentage of the segment, and whatever they love is something that most people won't buy. But I think manufacturers do that sometimes at their own risk, because recently I just saw an Audi RS6 Avant go by, which is, I think, the only way you can get the RS6 in America is a station wagon. And BMW just brought over the touring version of the M5, and they did it both as a regular sedan and as a wagon, and yet the wagon is doing all the selling. And in a lot of cars now, stick shifts are the new automatic. So Volkswagen, just a quick idea, bring back the stick and put it in the Tiguan. I think that would be a really nice addition to what is generally a pretty fun and interesting car. Anyway, as always, this is Roman saying thanks to RMAP, and head on over to alltfl.com for more news, views, and real world reviews. I'll see you next time. Ciao.